All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, November 18th, and my name is Christina Rico, Executive Director of the BCDC. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. Before we proceed with the agenda, I'm required by open meeting law to notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. And just for the minutes, Commissioners Garland, Haseen, Love, Lubinow, Nagahiro, and Solano are present. Tonight's agenda will include presentations for projects at 151 Cambridge Street, West End, also known as the West End Library, and 434 Jamaicaway Street, Jamaica Plain, also known as the Rogerson-Beaufort. Tonight's meeting's proceedings will begin with presentation from the proponent, followed by comments and a discussion from the commissioners, and then an opportunity for public comments, and finally a discussion of next steps for each project. So we do that cycle 2 times. It's going to take me just one quick second here to promote all of the folks who are presenting for the West End Library. Actually, it would be super helpful to me if anybody from that team who needs to be promoted, if you could just raise your digital hand and I'll go ahead and promote you. Okay. So Megan, I've made you a presenter. Nathan, I've made you a presenter.
I'm sorry, Christina, I'm going to say it out loud because I can't find my little raised hand thing.
Okay, that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's very helpful. Gigi, I've made you a presenter. And then is Christelle joining us? Christelle, I'm sorry about this. I'm the only facilitator. Thank you folks for your patience. Okay. So quick preamble, this will be the second presentation of the proposed project to the Commission following an introduction at the March 4th, 2025 monthly meeting. As a reminder, Commission procedures recommend no more than 3 meetings to review the ADB application. To the project team, please note that your presentation will be limited to 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you're nearing the end of your time. And with that, I invite the project team to begin whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks, Christina. Nate, if you can go ahead and share. Awesome. Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name is Megan Altendorf. I am a design director at Mass Design Group, and tonight we'll be presenting the updated design for the West End Library site development at 151 Cambridge Street. I'm joined by our development partners, POA and Cass Capital, as well as the AOR, the architectural team, and G2 Collaborative, the landscape architects. We will review what we heard from you last time, how we responded, look at materiality in the library facade, and G2 will present updates to the landscape and site design. Here are some quick stats on the program. The project is 14 stories, grounded by a 2-story public library podium with 12 residential stories above. There will be 119 new units of affordable housing. We've worked very closely with Boston Public Library to increase the size of the programmable library space slightly. However, none of the other programming elements on this slide have changed since March 4th when we saw you last. So first, I will recap what we heard at the last BCDC. So at the March 4th BCDC, we heard that commissioners were concerned that the off-center overhang was visually competing with nearby historic buildings. Commissioners sought greater legibility of the library, so it was more distinctive from the rest of the building. Commissioners wanted to better understand how the facade design relates to the transitional context. And finally, commissioners were excited about the concept of the public plaza space between the library and the Otis House. And since that March 4th meeting, the design team has met with various city agencies at least 10 times, carefully balancing the needs of these various stakeholders from the city to develop the updated design and streetscape that you'll see today. POA has also been in close contact with Historic New England next door at the Otis House to make sure that we're communicating with them and working with them, especially around this public plaza space between our buildings. So then we will go ahead and look at how we've responded in the updated design. So we've really wanted to maintain the project mission, which we presented on March 4th, to rebuild social infrastructure in the West End. And we've maintained the following goals, which were kind of our primary goals: to relate to the diverse scale and layered histories of the built fabric from large-scale institutional buildings to adjacent historic buildings. We are prioritizing the location and expression of community spaces, both in the building and surrounding site. And our goal has been to create distinct expressions for massing elements to help break down the scale and reinforce an idea of constructing a fabric with different pieces coming together. So on the next slide, as the project has progressed through the design process, the team has really strived to maintain the constructability and affordability of the project, which has resulted in the material selection evolving over time. At the residential tower frame, the material has transitioned from terracotta to brick and now to ACM. Inherently, the texture of the residential frame has evolved with this change in materials as well. We felt the prior color scheme didn't read as successfully with the necessary alteration of material and texture. The current color scheme, however, acknowledges the material's properties and texture while achieving a similar design intent to the previously proposed. So the revised color scheme, we feel like it fits really well within the transitional context while subtly contrasting its historic neighbors. The front tower features a light, warmer gray tones, and the rear tower mass features burgundy tones relating to the proposed brick you see at levels 3 through 5. And then here is kind of another view, an oblique view of before and after. And just really quickly, a heads up on these two renderings. In the second rendering, we've removed the trees for clarity because the original rendering was a photoshopped image from a photo. So we are not reducing the amount of trees that you're seeing between these two renderings. Just want to make that really clear that they're just removed for clarity on the second one. So we've made additional adjustments to the design based on your feedback and feedback from city agencies. The library is now a distinct expression grounded with a stone facade and ample glazing. This 2-story volume has been pulled south, eliminating that front overhang at levels 3 through 5 that was there before. The mid-rise brick volume relates to historic neighbors, but has a clear forward-thinking approach to detailing and finish of the masonry. We've maintained the side overhang as it allows for a larger, more usable public plaza. We believe it enhances the connection between the library and the Otis House, and it also allows for a clearly delineated residential entry zone that feels open and safe, separate from the library entry. And then on the next slide, I think these renderings really illustrate that the building fits appropriately into the West End's transitional context. So moving on to materiality. Like I said, we've revised the color scheme of the tower to create more contrast between the building and its neighbors while maintaining a level of regard for the Otis House and Old West Church. We're proposing a mix of ACM, metal profile panels, and brick warm gray, and burgundy tones of brick. On the next slide, we've just got some precedent photos of kind of the tones of metal and brick that we're looking at. And as I mentioned before, our goal is to kind of contrast our neighboring buildings. So we've selected this burgundy brick colors to really pick up on the secondary tones found in the Otis House mix rather than mimicking its primary red tone. And now we'll go ahead and zoom in a bit more on the changes we've made to the library facade. We've worked really painstakingly with Boston Public Library to develop a facade that gives the library the civic presence that it really warrants. In an effort to make the library stand out along Cambridge Street, we've pulled its facade south. It's now proud of that brick mass at levels 3 through 5 above. We've also increased the amount of curtain wall, boosting transparency and welcoming visitors into the building. We've shifted the brick materiality proposed in the previous scheme to, we've shifted the materiality of the library facade from the brick to a contrasting limestone. And then here on the next slide is a view of the library from the southwest. The pocket park you see there on the left is now an outdoor reading room private to the library, accessed only from the library interior. On the next slide, you'll see a view from the southeast, where the residential entry is kind of recessed on the eastern side of the library, adjacent to the new public plaza that Gigi will speak to later in the presentation. And then here's a view from the east, kind of taken if you're standing in front of the Otis House, looking west down Cambridge Street. And then, as I mentioned before, we're now proposing a limestone facade for the library to really make it stand out. We've also adjusted some of the proportions of the brick horizontal banding at levels 3 through 5 to better relate to the revised cornice line of the library. And in order to address some concerns about the durability of the facade, particularly where it meets the ground, we've introduced a granite building base, kind of in contrasting tones for the base of the library facade and the planters, and integrated seating into these elements. And we'll continue to work with the library on these seating elements, and also to design a fence that allows for visual connection from the street without being able to be climbed, which was very important to them. And then on this slide, like I said, we're working with the library on signage and the canopy design, and we've included some precedent images here, kind of illustrating that design intent. And then on the next slide, we've got kind of an image of the library facade color palette. So in addition to the limestone, we're proposing a dark bronze for the curtain wall and a canopy that would tie in with the colors on the tower volume above. And like I mentioned, we're proposing kind of these two tones of granite, which would be achieved by different finishes. So a lighter tone at the base of the limestone library facade and a darker tone at the pocket park plinth and the planters. And then finally, to understand the various scales at the sidewalk level, we've created this section through the library pocket park, looking east towards the library entry. We really see the pocket park fence as an opportunity to introduce a custom artful element, potentially tying back to the library's mission or the West End's history, and we'll continue to work with BPL on that exact design. And so I will pause here and pass it over to Gigi to present the updates we've made to the landscape and streetscape design in greater detail.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Nice to see you all this evening. We will start with a site diagram that we showed you back in March, but wanted to revisit just so that everybody is understanding the kind of various zones of the landscape, the different uses that we're addressing in our design, including the accessible open space that's on the east side of the building, but the top side of this page, with a service vehicle access that goes all the way to the back of the site for maintenance vehicles, And then the realm of the library along Cambridge Street, as well as, of course, the public way sidewalk and the furnishing zone out by the street. The next slide, please, Nate, is our plan in its current condition that shows, again, the overall site. In the next slide, we'll zoom in a little bit. We're going to flip everybody around so that we can zoom into the front of the building. And really, this slide is just to help everybody understand the circulation that we're dealing with in terms of access to the library, the sloped walk that goes along the face of the library, that's the accessible entrance to the library, with the residential access right behind that. And then there are various other ways to get to the front door of the library. You can see with those orange arrows, the pink marks are just highlighting where we have bike racks out on site. And of course, the blue arrows towards Cambridge Street are the general flow of pedestrian traffic that we have along the street. And then the next slide just turns the trees back on. We had those turned off on the previous slide so that everybody can see where we are getting planting in on the site. And we're really trying to maximize the areas that we can plant. Next slide. So this was the plan that you saw back in March, and some of the things that we heard were about questions about material palette, and we are continuing to evolve that. We'll show you that in a minute, but that, you know, the hardscape materials need to continue to evolve with the building palette and also to help understand the kind of different zones and uses across the site. We heard about large format pavers and eliminating the disappearing steps that you see between the library entrance and the street, and also just an ask to further investigate planters and where we were engaging planters with the building or not. So the next plan, Nate, thanks. Here is where we are today, and we are, you know, that we haven't picked a product, so to speak, for paving, but we are working with large format pavers near the entrance to the library, and a smaller format paver that appears in the shared open space, because that needs to be able to accommodate vehicles. And we are, sorry, I just got something stuck in my throat. Anyway, so the areas that are with the larger format pavers are defining where the entrance to the library is and the entrance to the residential tower. Next slide, please. These are just some images so you can see where we are thinking in terms of unit pavers and material precedent, you know, where we are with character, benches on the lower part, looking at granite benches, how they integrate with the facade of the building and the granite plinth that Megan mentioned, and then having some wood bench elements and some potentially stacked bench elements in the open space that's on the side of the building.
The flag to the proponent team on time.
Okay, ooh, I'll be quick. This is the view that you saw a few minutes ago, similar to what Megan showed, but we have the street trees turned back on this so you can see a more kind of whole picture. And straight ahead is how you would get into the library on the sloped walkway. Okay, shared open space. As Megan said, we're in continued conversation with Historic New England and the folks at Otis House as they develop their plans. We wanted to show you what an interim condition would look like since we're on a different schedule than they are. So we took a section cut so you can see that the Otis House is higher than our site. And so this interim condition holds their existing grades that they have across into our site. And then the next slide, Nate, is a potential future condition. We're not, you know, the design of that has not happened yet, but just looking at how you could integrate this space to make one full space, which is what we hope for. And here's a section of how you could negotiate that grade change to help support the program of the open space. We do, just a quick note, we do have a series of program diagrams that we for time, didn't include in this presentation, but we'd love to talk about those with you during discussion. And I think I may have eked it all out. Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to some discussion here.
Perfect timing.
All right, commissioners, anyone want to get us going?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks, team, for the presentation. I would say generally, I'm personally am much more pleased with in fact, the original design that was part of the earlier submission. I think back in March. I feel like looking at this image here, I'm seeing almost three separate architectural languages. The previous to me appeared to have a much more unified, therefore simpler, more resolved approach to the massing. And I always applauded the previous because it felt like there was much more of a harmonious feeling between the program relationship and the facade, meaning the housing on top, even though you have that sort of middle zone element that's protruding, cladding it in the same material to me always felt unified and felt together, and then having a distinctive quality at the base felt right because there was a program shift, and I think you were also trying to better respond to the Otis house, which is lifted above the grade plane a bit. So I would certainly encourage a little bit more. I really actually strongly encourage looking back at what worked in the previous design that really unified things together, and hoping that that there can be a balance struck there. I will say, however, that I do appreciate the limestone base here. I think there's a softness, there's an elegance to it. I like the vertical offsetting of the materiality that you're showing between the large windows. There's a lot that I like about the base of the building, with the library, the signage, the strength of the architectural canopy, and how that really speaks to the public realm and will draw people in. I can imagine that being a phenomenal space that you can see into day and evening. And then the top of the building being something that's a little bit more set back, but resolved. And by resolved, I mean unified in its materiality expression. I would say if you could just go to slide 19 for a second.
Give me a second while I gotta
Oh, sure.
get out of here to get to the right slide.
I can just keep going. I mean, I've already
Yep.
mentioned the limestone with the red brick in the previous scheme, and so I'm wondering how much that can tie in. I do like the residential entry being set back and how there's an integration with the public realm streetscape, and just being very clear about what zones are public and what zones are private. I think that's more important than ever on this site because I do understand that there is a site security concern, or at least there's a concern that has been expressed by the public. And I'm curious by the proponent, and I'm not looking for the answer now, but just something to follow up on is how does the site become transparent and open and inviting while also doing a good job at managing security from some of the things that have happened on the site or may happen around the site. How can the site, by its architecture and by its signage and visual cues and tools, security tools, become both a transparent, accessible place to be, walkable, inviting, but also safety and security. One point along that line is the reading garden that you're showing in the landscape. I saw that there was an arrow going from the building out to the reading garden, which I was encouraged to see. So therefore, I wonder if you're thinking about some sort of a picket rail fenced condition from the street that would allow the library some ability to manage how that reading garden comes about and the usership of it. Again, just to help mitigate some potential security concerns. I think I would also add, I liked and I forget what slide it's on, but one of your landscape slides showing the commitment and investment to the unit pavers in that public realm space, even in the vehicular drive. I think that sends a strong message to the pedestrian that this is a pedestrian space versus a large strip of what could have been asphalt. I like the gentle nod with the bollards, which probably could be lit, but giving clear signs to where pedestrians can get in and out of their apartments versus where vehicles go. But my last comment does bring it back to a concern about vehicles. And what I would really love to learn more, perhaps at the next meeting, about how you plan to manage what is a very busy street with trucks, deliveries, cars, the routine nature of that. It seems to be like they're coming in one way and then backing out on the street. I didn't see in the site plan the ability for a 3-point turn or some ability to turn the car around to just put the driver and the pedestrian in the safest condition possible. I know I said one more comment, but do you have one shot of the facade upper that shows the detail where you have the punch window and I think 3 layers of offset brick and a contrasting material there?
Are you talking about the tower facade or
The
the
tower
brick
facade.
facade? The tower facade, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a zoomed
Or just even
in.
your very first image, the elevation would be fine. Um, and it might be hard to see here, but I would be curious to understand a bit more about that layering that you're showing. And in fact, is that achievable? What I mean by that is the dimensions of the depth seem to be rich and very attractive. I love it when facades can give that much depth, but because I'm seeing brick and full depth brick and sort of knowing what's behind that, seeing 3 or 4 layers of significant offset before you get to the window itself leads me to think that's a fairly thick wall system. So again, I want to believe in it. I just would hope that you could provide a bit more clarity on is that the real depth we're going to get, or in the end, would there be a fraction of that amount of depth? Because I think the play on depth and shadow and the feeling that the windows are deep into the facade is a character defining element of the facade. And I just want to understand if that's in fact achievable. Thank you.
Megan, you can feel free to respond if you have any questions, or the design team can. This is meant to be a conversation. And if you don't,
Sure.
David has seen us up next, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Nate, if you want to go to slide 47, I might have hidden it, but I think if you click on it, you'll see. Yeah, so this is something we already did adjust once, and these are old colors, so we did not update the colors for this presentation. But you can see kind of the after is what we're looking at today. So the idea is that it's really only it's 8 inches depth there of brick, and those 3 that appear to be layered are actually really just in the same plane at an angle stacked at the bias on the bias there. So and again, this is really just a sketch. So once we get into design development, we'll further develop this, and we have been working a little bit with our structural engineer already, thinking about how we're going to relieve the brick, where the angles are going. But hopefully this gives a little bit more clarity as to what we're showing in the rendering there.
Yes, it does. And I applaud the craftsmanship. And so I'm happy to see that you're thinking about it. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Jonathan. David Hatsine?
Thank you, Mimi. I was not present, I don't believe, at when this was first presented. So I'm really seeing it for the first time, and I want to make my comments in that spirit. Overall, I think it's a very, very nice project, and a lot of nice development, especially on the expression of the library as a more prominent feature on the street. I understand how through the value engineering process, the pricing process, you would have landed on ACM for the upper floors. That being said, I also very much appreciated the initial scheme where there was, I believe, brick detailing top to bottom, or at least it appeared to me to be that way when you first presented it. But recognizing that that may not be possible, um, I I have a couple of questions, comments. If you could go, Megan, to the overall view, thank you. Thanks. Um, it was very, again, seeing this for the first time, I didn't realize at first that there was this larger mass that was behind the building, and that the light gray ACM portion was nested that was nested between those two pieces, and that's helpful to understand. Quick question, the high-rise portion of that, is that ACM as well? Is it just the brick corner that is in the
Yes.
masonry? Okay.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Just that volume at levels 3 through 5, and it does kind of turn down to level 1. Yep, it's kind of obscured by the Otis house there, but that's the area where we're proposing kind of the brick frame.
Yeah, totally understand. And I think the way you're handling that detailing looks very nice to me. I guess my two comments, one that are both aesthetic, so you can take it or leave it. I think that the richer sort of purpley brick, which um, uh, I I initially years ago thought was not necessarily a good complement to red brick, but as your precedent image reveals, came around to the idea that actually that can be a very rich and contemporary backdrop to a traditional red brick building. I'm okay with that change, even though there is something reassuring and pleasing about the color scheme on the left. Um, However, I wonder if the level of contrast between the light gray volume and the richer tones in the building is perhaps, I'm talking specifically about the upper floors, is a little too sharp, and is actually taking me into the language of the hospital architecture and the buildings down the street, and even some of the government buildings, a little bit too much. I mean, I recognize that this is a transitional area and there's a real mix of architectures here, but again, I wonder if the other thing about the lightness of it is that it's, in my mind, emphasizing the new condition that we have, which is less glazing. There appears to be, broader panels of blankness, if you will. And I wonder if that was just darker, more of a bronzer tone, that was maybe a similar value to the rear of the building, that sharpness of contrast, and I know you're trying to make this look like an assemblage, but that sharpness of contrast might help alleviate even some of the concerns that Jonathan just expressed about the unity or the of the whole complex. In using that purpley brick, we actually had a lot of luck with dark mullions, dark bronze, et cetera. And so that's something that I think would be relatively easy to look at if you haven't already, and might be something to consider. Lastly, a very nice precedent image on the masonry portion of the project. If you could go to that slide. Yeah, that's the building on the left is the one is ours. So I'm thinking of it just that dark gray, the dark gray bay is something to maybe think about, something just a little darker. But if you know, there's another slide next, with a limestone slide. Yes, thank you. I really like the choice of material here, and I really like the precedent image. And I'm wondering if that strength of the limestone as it supports the item B there, the cross piece, feels really solid, and then it's completely eroded at the corner. And that feels a little counter to the materiality of it to me. I wonder if there was a more masonry where that trabeated piece really looks like it rests on some assemblage of masonry, which it does on the right-hand side, but less so on the left-hand side, unless I'm missing something. So it's just about the balance of the expression of blocks of masonry, if you will, in that zone that I know you're trying to create as much transparency into the library as possible, but it feels a little bit like that piece is kind of hanging out in space to me. Do you understand what I'm talking about? The left above where it says BPL.
At the canopy.
At the
that-
canopy, yeah,
yeah.
it just feels like that piece of masonry is kind of like hanging out there with a big piece of brick and a big piece of building landing on it. And I know there's columns inside, but I feel like maybe when I look at the material choices on the lower right, where the mass, where the limestone really feels like it's supporting something, that maybe there's an opportunity there to rethink that. So those are two truly material oriented comments, but I'll leave it there.
Thanks,
Thank you very
David.
much.
Anne Marie?
I'll jump in. I will do my best to build upon my colleagues' comments. So I was at the March presentation, and as I recall, our comments about better distinguishing the library had more to do with sort of increasing the legibility of it being a public building and the entrances. To be honest, I was surprised to see the changes you made and the changes in color, because I do think that detracts from the overall character of the initial proposal. So I would, I would encourage you, and I also share David's concerns too, that the change in not only materiality but color does remind me of institutional buildings. And then the fact, I don't know if we discussed this before, but the fact that there's sort of the grouping of 2 floors on the upper levels further emphasizes that to me. And I think something that I think about in terms of urban design is sort of what signals that something is a residential building versus an institutional building. And granted, you are navigating a very challenging site here, but I just really find that the scale and texture of what's now that I can't quite, what's now the darker, that you have the base where the library is, and then you've got the 3-story segment and then the tower. I think the 3-story segment does a better job of communicating that this is a residential building. Going back to that precedent image that David referred to, that is one of his firm's buildings. I think the other thing, I have mixed reactions. I'm not sure I share my colleagues' reactions to the change in material for the library as a whole, but I do think there's something to be said about precedents, and even in the adjoining historic building, about how do we integrate more than one material. I think we are in an era right now where the architecture, we are leaning towards a more modernist, holistic approach. And I think there's an opportunity to maybe integrate stone in the base of the building and the library in a very contemporary way that signals that this is an entrance, this is a public space, and then let the tower be simpler. And then I think the third piece, I believe, or the third question I'd raise is a concern about finding the entrance to the residential tower. I think that's also a key piece in urban design, is how do we find the entrances to each of these buildings, and then also the consideration of some of the safety concerns that have been raised by at least one member of the public in the adjoining area. How do I, as a visitor or resident of the building, find that entrance and distinguish it from the library entrance? Thank you.
Thanks, Anne Marie. I'm going to pass it on to David Nagahiro, but again, Megan and design team, feel free to chime in if you have any comments you'd like to share.
This is Christelle. I will share a comment really quick. Hi, my name is Christelle.
Wait, Are you part
Did
of the
I bring
design
you?
team?
No, I'm the developer. My name is Christelle
Okay.
Salinas. I work with Preservation of Affordable Housing. I'm the project manager. Um, if it's okay, just to interject, just want to share a little bit about our security plan. I know this is something that we have discussed in the community meetings that we've had. It is an evolving plan. We have welcomed all the feedback that we received. I know Colin had a comment in the chat, and it's something that we've heard in the community meeting that we had prior. But we are working on the draft security plan that we have presented to some of the community stakeholders in the area that we will incorporate. It is an evolving plan, as I mentioned. It will involve, cameras at every angle of the building, along with the building being managed and supervised during the on hours by our management team, and then during the off hours by a security guard. We do have an actual plan that we're putting together where we've incorporated the crime prevention through environmental design methods that our landscape architect has been working with our security consultant on to try and use the design itself to try and enhance the security measures from the open space plaza without necessarily setting up barriers along the site or harsh fencing to keep that open, to try and keep that open feel a little bit, because the library is a public space, but we are trying to keep it as controlled and as safe as possible, not just for the residents, for the community and anyone that, wants to use it and go into the library. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that because this is a design meeting, so we didn't get a chance to incorporate that in here, but it is in the works and wanted to let the commissioners know.
So thanks for that. I do think that we want to keep our comments focused to design, so I'm glad that you noted that. But let's pass this on to David Nagahiro, and then we'll talk about any open space issues and how the design can help with the security concerns raised.
Okay, well, thank you. Great presentation, Megan and Gigi. I think, Megan, I'm going to apologize in advance because I think there may be a little bit some conflicting, direction. But, I wasn't fortunate to be at the first presentation, but I did watch the entire video and the presentation that you gave before. And, one of the comments I remember, Anne Marie made and Bill Ron made was that it was a very, very good presentation, very clear. Bill was very complimentary to the materiality and the beautiful kind of combination of materials. And so I just wanted to say that at the outset. And to that end, I think that there's a clarity and simplicity and understated elegance of the first scheme that I think it feels like it's a little lost in the second scheme only because their materiality is so contrasted. There's something about the brick that comes down from Beacon Hill and kind of washes over that whole area. And when it crosses the street, it makes this really interesting, abrupt change to very commercial. And I think your original scheme kind of created the spirit of a lot of that Beacon Hill brick, which I feel is a little bit lost in the other option. And I was probably one of the people that maybe liked the kind of the projection of the second, the third, fourth, fifth stories because of its scaling delineation or that datum line that it created in conjunction with the Otis House, which I think was very effective. And then it set itself back. And I understand wanting to put the library forward, but I feel like in the rendering on page 10 that you have here, that it feels very applied because it's so thin in comparison to the setback. And because it's a contrasting material, it just feels like it's very thin in its relationship to the weight that it's carrying that, David was mentioning. So I'm not sure I agree with the idea of the limestone. I do like the idea that it has its civic presence. That's not but I do think that because it's such a thin setback, it feels like it's applied and it's not quite doing what the original massing strategy did. And that especially on the top where you really changed the material as it went up. I do think that if you could find a complementary color that worked with it, your detailing, I think, is going to be very beautiful. And I just think that the left-hand side had a little bit more understated elegance to me. And the other one is a little bit screaming for attention with the different contrasting materials. So that's Gigi's comment. And then on the materiality, the iron spot brick that you identified, the purple tone, I think is really beautiful. I think that because it does have that silvery kind of quality to it, when the light hits it, it will feel very much lighter than it appears as that kind of deep eggplant color. So I like that material contrast a lot. Gigi's plan, I think, was very nice in that it does address the Otis house. I was on the Preservation Alliance board, which was in the Otis house for many years. And the idea that you're actually, we would use the side entry as the entry into the building. So that kind of public realm space, I think, is going to be very important. I know there's a lot of service elements with, servicing a residential building and a library with bringing in books and that sort of thing. I don't know how you deal with that one-way kind of dead end of the access to that street, but I do think there's some really important, and it doesn't help that the front of the Otis house has the brick wall or the stone wall, which kind of blocks a lot of the visual connectivity between the two. But I do think that you're such a skilled architect, and I think that many of these moves that I had mentioned, I think in the original concept, I think might be a little bit stronger. So I apologize for maybe contrasting some of the comments, but I do think that there's something very beautiful about what you had created.
Thanks, David. Laura, I'm going to pass it on to you, but Christine, I see your hand is raised. Are you giving us a time check or
Just a quick
more?
time check.
Okay.
I'm noticing the number of participants we have, and there might be some interest in public testimony.
Okay. All right. We'll pass it on to Laura.
Could we go to a site plan? I think 31, 32 maybe? And then could we see the previous one? So by pushing the building out, which I think is right in terms of its presence, you've made the landscape have to do much harder work. In other words, the landscape is now kind of the base of the building. It feels that way. And so I would go to one of the perspectives that shows the entrance that, and I think the landscape has a different role now, particularly at the front door, where you have that sloped ramp that is giving you accessibility. But I wonder about whether or not that needs to be sloped in contrast to the building, or whether or not it should just be drawn across and made into something much more simple. And maybe there's a way to put, well, actually, I want to talk about the entrance. So if you don't mind, let's go back to the plan. One of the great things about libraries is that there's this sort of grandness and entry into them. And previously you had steps that wrapped around. And I'm questioning this as to why you need steps on the west side. And one of the reasons I'm mentioning that is I don't understand the privilege of that. And I would rather see that in a much more generous set of steps into the front entry. The width of the steps at the front feel just a little bit cramped to me. It doesn't give a lot of breathing space around the building. And you've gone to great lengths to really provide an airiness to the library facade. The other reason for my concern about the west steps is I think about that library and what I'm going to see outside, and that corner, that glass corner, is so important. And to basically get a view out to the bike parking feels a little harsh. And I wonder if you wouldn't rather give up that space to some green. So I'll just make you know, is there a way for you to put landscape between the interior courtyard, the reading room that the library is doing outside, get rid of those steps, and then find a way to provide another layer of landscaping that you see that together with the courtyard and the front, you start to see those collectively, and it starts to feel like a landscape, like the building is kind of held by something. And you know, I'm a landscape architect, but I think there's nothing better, excuse me, than being able to look outside, particularly beautiful contemporary buildings, and see landscape. You know, you just don't get to do it in the city. And so here's the chance to kind of thicken that experience. So I think you could give yourself a lot more real estate by eliminating those steps and then looking at what happens between the public walk and that square area. I mean, if you look at the dimension of it, it's pretty big relative to the spaces on the east side, right? If you could pick that up, you'd realize that it's as wide, if not wider, than many parts of that. So, but I think that more development of the landscape and how it complements the facade. I'm also, can you go back and forth between the two plans? One more time. Thank you. So you have the classic issue in cities, which is how do we service buildings? And I understand the need to leave this lane open. I'd love to hear a little bit about the service, not so much in depth about why you have to have service there. I've looked at the context plans. I think I get it. But how a truck comes out? Does the truck back out? You know, what time of day does that truck show up? How many trucks show up? In other words, how busy is that lane going to be? I'm also feeling like the landscape has become a little more piecemeal on that side, and that in order to hold that kind of open space, that you need to thicken or combine some of the green spaces. The plants will be happier when you do that anyway, and I don't think it's a, you know, particularly bad to have the bikes, you know, grouped together. You know, it's a known factor in the world of downtown biking. And likewise, I don't know, I couldn't see what happens on the vestibule, but going into the building. But again, I think that you ought to look at landscape as you are entering that. So I'll let you respond to the service, if someone could.
Yeah, so I can just a couple things, Laura. Thanks for those comments. I think the steps at the front have presented a real challenge, and you know, we want to
slope.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
because of the existing sidewalk slope that already exceeds 5%. So we're you know, I think you're reading our minds, you know, from the last plan you saw that had a much kind of wider, broader gesture. And that's you know, really changed now that that stair's gotten more narrow. So we should continue to grapple with that. And I think the west stair has primarily been about keeping that space to the west not being a kind of dead-end nook, and keeping pedestrian traffic flowing through there. I think you're right, it would be great to have some green there. It is, you know, for a site that has all these challenging circulation routes, you know, where you can have a kind of eddy space that can be green, I think is really critical. So we'll definitely revisit that. As far as the service goes, and Christelle, you should interrupt me at any point, it still continues to be a bit in flux. The idea is that that service lane is not used overly regularly. We can show, I don't know whether Nate, you can spin really quickly to a couple of the program diagrams that the library van actually, we've been working with the city on this, and the library van actually does not go into the back space. It actually has a mountable curb. We're trying to keep most everyday services out
see.
of that space. Now, I say that with the big caveat of the trash pickup is still very much in debate about whether the trash trucks would pull into the space and have to back out. This diagram shows a moving truck, which would be scheduled through POA's management team, would actually pull forward onto Cambridge Street and back into the site to then pull out forward. But again, that would be a scheduled, not an everyday event. I think really the biggie is trash, and whether that is, trash bins are brought out to the curb and the trash truck comes very early in the morning and pauses on the street and loads there, or whether the trash truck is pulling into the site. And there are, arguments for both that we're hearing from all over the place. So that's still a bit of a question mark.
Add on, and sorry, don't want to speak out of turn. Just want to note that the trash, we have had some comments about it being, ensuring that it doesn't pile up, because there's some other issues with rats, etc., that could come up. So we have been exploring the daily trash pickup, and then we have re-engaged our traffic engineer, as Gigi mentioned, to look at the scenarios based on the comments that we've received so far. So we are still evaluating that trash scenario that Gigi just presented, along with others. Just wanted to note that.
Could we go to the plan that shows the space at the Otis, next to the area we were just talking about? And I heard you, Gigi, that this is in flux, and I really hope we don't have to take up that space with circulation. And I get the accessibility issue, but I think if you could, find a partnership with Otis to make that plaza feel much more connected to both buildings, so that both of them have a bonus of that space and different ways that they can use it. I think one could really enliven the other. So things that are being done by Otis and things that are being done by the housing and the library really have a home, a green home that they can work in. I know you don't control that space, but I would really encourage the proponent to work carefully with them to enhance your own space, because it's pretty grim on the Otis side. And then one last thing, can we get more street trees? I'm unsure about why there are so few, but maybe there's something, utilities or something going on there.
There's a little bit of that. We have it's barely on the screen on this image, but on the left, there's a crosswalk that we're receiving, which is why there's nothing to the left of the two trees. And to the right, where it feels like we could fit one more tree, is actually where the library van pull-off spaces.
Got it.
And so that has kept us at the two, which when you don't see the library van on it, looks like you really want one more in there. But we have to allow for the turning of the van to not be backing up, to be able to pull forward up into that curb spot and then pull back off forward.
Yeah, and I have to wonder about this lonely guy right here.
On the left, yeah.
So maybe when this starts to be something else, it can
jump back into that.
It can be
Yeah.
incorporated.
Yeah,
It
I think
doesn't
that's
feel
right.
like it's an outlier.
I think that's
So
right.
can
I do want to.
I want to ask a question about this loading thing, which if you don't mind. So is there a larger plan where we see the loading dock access that you could pull up. It may
I
not be
think
a
you had a
landscape.
drawing that showed where it extends deeper into the plan. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's a full plan.
Yeah, that 28. So
Yeah.
there's a gate, you can see there's a fence, David, and a gate midway.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I'm sure you explored this, but I'm just going to say that I'm concerned as a fairly significant I believe this is a rental apartment building, that move-ins are going to be much more often and more frequent than something that can be arranged, early in the morning. And I wish that there was a way for a box truck at least to pull it all the way in back into a loading dock as a three-point turn, pull out and pull straight out onto Cambridge Street without backing back onto Cambridge Street. I see there's trash and fire pump and transformers and all kinds of things in the way. And I'm sure you're trying to hold on to as much space for the library as possible. But I would be worried about that. Just in the long-term operations of the building, I think that it's very, very hard to control move-ins to the minute. And I wish there was a way. I understand the big trucks, that might not be possible, but if there was some way for trash or whatever to be reconfigured so the transformer could slide down or something so that a box truck could at least get 2/3 of the way in and then do a three-point turn to get out, that would be great. But I suspect you've looked at that. Anyway,
We
just
have, we have, but I definitely understand your concern and your comment. And, once we engage more with the utility provider, maybe we'll find out that we don't need as large of a space, but for now, we really have to follow their guidelines, and assume worst case scenario, with Eversource and, we know that they're not very flexible.
No, Eversource is always a worst case scenario. But I hear you. I'm just think about that because I know you're not going to get that perfect three-point truck turn thing, but if there was some way to maneuver a vehicle, imagine one person is backed all the way in and then another truck pulls in, not knowing, it's just the logistics of that worry me.
Yeah, and I will agree with that wholeheartedly. That is an incredibly busy stretch of Cambridge Street with that entrance into Whole Foods and the doctor's, office. It's almost impossible today to navigate that little stretch in front of the Otis house. So I do think that will just add to that pressure. But going back to Laura's comment about the reading room, I really do support that idea. I was very concerned about that reading room garden, or what I think that's how the reading garden. Right now, it just doesn't feel like it would be a nice space. And while you could design a beautiful fence, it really does feel like a barrier. And if there was a way to layer on a landscape on the public side of what could still be a barrier, understand the need, I think that would really soften that condition. That I don't think it's just a nice grill that actually would make that transition. I do think there needs to be some landscape buffer. I also would like for you guys to address the lighting. I think the site lighting is going to be absolutely critical in this design to understand, the safety concerns and to make people feel comfortable about how the lighting supports the landscape. And I don't know if that requires just lighting diagrams or a night rendering, but I do think that's something that you need to bring the next time that we actually meet. And then I know we're really tight on time, so I have two comments on if you can go to the before and after. I, like David, believe I was not at the last presentation. Apologies, I really don't think I commented. I want to see the side by side of the renderings of the buildings, the previous design and the current proposed.
Yeah, it's page 10.
And so what I notice, if you can go to the side rendering especially, I think that's this. So what's really successful about the original design is that you can read the frame of the double height volume, and you can read the frame of the lower stacked volume very clearly because the inset panels were light and contrasting from the overall frame. I think that's what you've lost in the new palette. I think that that lightness of the frame has just become more tone on tone, that it's hard to distinguish frame from infill. And so, I understand you're exploring the different colors. I think the contrast might be more in the inset panel to frame than it actually is volume. It's just what I think is so successful about the previous version. And the actual tone, I definitely think if we're talking about iron spot that gets too dark, it might be a little bit too dark, but I do think that some of the materials you're showing can be handsome. And then the last thing if we go to a view of the library and the smaller stack, there's a rendering or almost an elevation. I do think that that offset's a little bit tenuous right now. If you go to the previous slide. And so I'm a little bit in agreement with David Nagahiro that it's not quite flush, it's not quite forward, it's just too tenuous. And so if you could think about that relationship more, I understand that the program might need to increase, but that banding is so thin at the top that it's not really helping distinguish. Like you want the limestone to feel like it can hold the weight of the other building. And the rendering of the limestone stacking separate from the floors 3 through 5 is really a strong idea, and I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost because that's a double structure or condition that you're talking about. And so in DD, that shifting and that stacking I think could be really elegant if you're able to get that shift to work
Yeah,
and that
and
sheerness in elevation.
if I could just make one small comment on what Mimi just brought up, I'm glad you showed this slide or brought this to light. Back looking again at the image on the left, I think there's something really clever about the relationship that you have where the library is set in and the volume above is somewhat projecting out because it offers like an extended residential canopy on Cambridge Street that brings your eye back to where the residential entry is. So even though the residential entry itself is set back a significant way from the face of the library, there's an architectural move that actually can bring you back there. It creates a great soffit opportunity. And I think also the way that the left side is grounded more to David's comment. So all that to say, I would actually encourage the massing relationship that you show on the left, but perhaps with the integration of the limestone, I personally think that would be something worth trying and seeing how that would look.
All right, Christina, I think I don't see any other hands, so maybe we need to see if we have public comments.
Excellent. A reminder that starting on January 1st, the commission will limit live public comments to the project's introduction. Members of the public interested in submitting comments to the commission are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project's review. At this time, we invite any members of the public in attendance who wish to contribute public comments to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And commissioners, I just wanted to read, since I don't see hands raised at this moment, and I'll give folks some more time to do so. We did receive a comment in the chat from Colin that I'm just going to read out loud very quickly here. So Colin Zick says, this is Colin Zick, president of the Beacon Hill Civic Association. I have a 6 p.m. meeting and want to comment, and it appears I will not be reached in time. We will send a letter as well, but reiterate the public safety concerns with seating and the driveway. In seating, this is an area that attracts negative behavior, encampments, and the seating as shown does not discourage that. A security guard will not solve this design flaw. And for the driveway, having trucks that serve the building back out to Cambridge Street into pedestrian bikes and motorized vehicles is not a safe solution. And he comments further that he will appreciate that there's a security plan, but plans can change and not be funded or implemented. That design is permanent and proper design can reduce the need for security, as such design issues that implicate security should not be passed over on the promise of an as yet finalized or funded security plan. And I just want to confirm that folks are in fact able to raise and use their hand functions, that the reactions are, I've not inadvertently somehow turned off a setting that I was not supposed to turn off. Okay. I see Megan has raised her hand. Okay, thanks Megan for that. Just giving me some peace of mind, appreciated. Okay, so commissioners, I'm gonna go ahead and close the comment period and then invite you to discuss next steps.
Right, commissioners, I think we have to make a decision here. Do I have any thoughts? I think we talked a lot about materiality and color palette. I think we talked about definitely the ground, you know, the open space, entrance to the building, the pocket park on the left-hand side or reading garden.
Well,
I just want to know if there's any, you know, what we're thinking in terms of we have to make a decision. Does this go to the monthly full commission meeting or come back to subcommittee?
well, I know, Mimi, that the hope is that this could be handled by the proponent in such a way that they would come back to the full commission for a vote, having made changes. I believe that would be their third meeting, if I've got that correct. And on some level, so much of the discussion was about materiality that I believe that the proponent could work with the staff to try and refine those issues, recognizing that we had strong feelings about it. On the subject of the ground plane and the transportation issues, I mean, I'm assuming that that's also being worked out with that has to satisfy the transportation department and all those loading issues, which I must say I'm concerned about. So it really, in my mind, it becomes more about the discussion of from a public realm point of view, that issue of the fenced off area, some of the comments that Laura made about the landscape, and ultimately the relationship of the BPL facade to the building above it. And, you know, given the changes that were made between the first and the second, it seems to me very possible that they could satisfy all of those things with internal conversation and then come back to us. But then again, maybe not. So I just kind of put that out there to elicit more thoughts and comments from other commissioners.
Yeah,
May I just make a,
oh, go ahead.
May I just interject really quickly? So a lot of the comments on the streetscape, landscape, the reading garden for the library, and they're actually designing the reading garden space. A lot of the comments were kind of things that we've talked a lot about with BPL. They were very opinionated, and we have worked really closely with them to make a lot of these decisions. And I think that they feel really good about where the design is now. Another thing, just a small comment on like the pocket park, for instance, you know, they have to have a 6-foot high fence from that lowest level that anybody could step up to. So if we raise a planter bed there, we're going to have to raise the fence, and that's kind of a non-negotiable for them. I think that, you know, bringing back like the stair that wraps the corner, I know for sure is something that is not, that's pretty non-negotiable. So there are certain things that, that we've really worked closely with them. So I just want to be really clear about that some of these things we simply just can't change based on the prior meetings that we've had with the city.
Yeah, Megan, that's helpful to hear. I do think some of those decisions are still remain problematic, but maybe Megan Richards will bring some light to the situation. You're muted, Megan.
Oh, Megan, let me promote you to co-host. So sorry. Lizzie's better at this than I am. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would just reiterate, these are, obviously, you guys are all aware, this is a very, so sorry, Megan Richards, the senior urban designer for the planning department. And this is a very complicated review process in that when you have a project that has a city, you know, library that has the library and public facilities department involved in the review and have opinions and feedback. And we also, because it's affordable housing, have MOH design review staff as well as planning department design review staff and you guys. So I think many of the comments we have been coordinating, we have regularly scheduled coordination design meetings with all of the city staff involved as well. And much of the kind of public realm security concerns from the library like have been raised at these meetings. And so, you know, I think we really, both myself is here tonight to hear your feedback and making sure that we are incorporating your comments into our feedback that we give as the planning department design feedback. Also, Eva Germain from MOH is here listening so that we are, you know, really trying to make sure that we as a city are coordinating this feedback together. So I just wanted to reiterate, I know Megan mentioned it, but I just wanted to support her that we, you know, it has been really complicated and complex, but we are doing our best working together to get through it and make sure that we are trying to find the best solutions possible.
I'll just say, since I made the comment about the corner, is one of the things that's different about this scheme is that corner wasn't there before, that kind of floating corner. So I do think it's important. You've got talented designers. There are a lot of ways to skin this. I truly believe that. And so I think that hearing, but I'm happy that you're actually kind of charged by that to start a discussion about it. So we'll leave it in your hands, but you know, I think we've all given you some pretty solid comments.
I also want to chime in here, Laura and Mimi. I think, as many folks have mentioned here, this is an incredible project. It's one of our first projects where we're delivering both public assets and housing on top. We did the Chinatown Library with you guys, and now this is sort of the second one. And we've learned a lot along the way. I think, to Megan's point, there's been a lot of stakeholders here that we're all trying to sort of appease as part of this process. I do think that a lot of the comments that I heard both from David and from, well, both David's and from Anne Marie and you, Mimi, focus on a lot of the materiality here. And I think those are things that we're working through. And I think we can come back to you with some additional study and work and refinement on that front. And then I think, Laura, to your point on the landscape and how to tie this together, I think Gigi got some really good feedback. And I think let's see what we can explore with the library to see what's possible there. I think you raised some really excellent points. But, you know, we want to keep this project moving in a expeditious way. One of the things, I was at one of the public meetings this past week, and one of the things we heard from members of the public was like, when is this going to be built, you know? And we don't hear that often here in the planning department. Folks excited about a development project, and so many people see the extraordinary benefit coming along with this. And these are, important details, but I think things that we have great talent on this side, both with the City Hall team and the proponent team to address those concerns, and can come back to you with some, neat studies that relate to that. And I think, Mimi, as you know, we're bringing projects back. Sometimes it may be it's not going to be as immediate. So we'll take our time to make sure that we come back with adjustments that really do reflect some of the feedback we've received tonight.
Right. And I do want to just highlight that this is a really nice project, and, the material issues will get resolved. I do think, the open space will get resolved. So I don't want to lose that. And I think what you're hearing us talk about are really refinements that can be worked out. And I'm glad that Megan, Richards chimed in, that she's here, and the representative from MOH is here. I do think you have a lot of oversight, and sometimes that, even works against the projects. But I do want to reiterate, this is a very nice project that we are excited to help, move forward and see realized. But we do have to make a decision, commissioners, and I just want to, see if we have a consensus about passing this along to the monthly meeting with all commissioners reviewing it, or
I'll make a
alternative.
motion if that's what you're looking for. I'm happy to make a motion given the comments that we just heard, to have this come back for a vote for the full commission, acknowledging that there are comments about materiality and things relating to the library that staff is going to pursue. And then, of course, obviously, if things go, if they'd like to come back to us for another subcommittee, we're available. But if not, maybe that's the path forward.
I mean, I think we don't, procedurally, we don't need a motion, but we need consensus from this group. And I would say maybe I should be asking, if there is a commissioner who feels strongly about seeing this again, I think I'm asking you to chime in and be very explicit with exactly what you would like to see at the next round, in addition to, the comments that we've talked about already.
I support this given I support it given the discussion we've had. I think we all understand the urgency of moving this project forward. We understand the capabilities of this team, and I think this is also a really good opportunity too. We have a lot of expertise on the planning department staff, and I think we, it's a matter of using the best judgment in bringing it forward to the full commission.
Thanks,
Likewise,
Anne-Marie.
yeah, I agree with that.
All right, Laura, I see a nod. I'm hearing consensus that we want to advance this to the next full commission. We definitely want to see some of the, studies that we have mentioned. I'm not going to repeat them again, and we look forward to working with the planning department on those revisions. And I think we're good with this project, Christina, and we can move on to our next proponent.
Great. Alrighty.
See you at full commission.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If the proponent team of the presenters for 434 Jamaicaway Street could just raise your hands, and I will elevate you to co-host. Just a quick introduction that this will be the second presentation of the proposed project at 434 Jamaicaway Street, Jamaica Plain, also known as Rogerson-Beaufort House, following an introduction at the March 4th, 2025 monthly meeting. As a reminder, commission procedures recommend that no more than 3 meetings to review the project. To the project team, please note that the presentation time is limited to 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you're nearing the end of your time. And with that, I will turn it over to the proponent team just as soon as I promote you all to co-host. Thanks everyone for your patience. All right, Ken. Philippe. All right. I see your hands are still raised, but I've given you co-host abilities. Walter Ramos, are you the last person to co-host? Great. Okay, so with that, I turn it over to you and I'll start the timer.
Thank you. Walter, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to present before the commission. My name is Walter Ramos. I'm the CEO of Rogerson Communities. We are a 165-year-old institution, and we are dedicated to the well-being of older adults, and that being affordable housing and care. And so we are very proud of this project that mixes both together, that we provide both affordable housing and memory care for older adults in the city of Boston. So I know we have very limited time. We've got some substantial changes to the design here. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you for this opportunity to present to you and hand it over to Philippe. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Good evening, everyone. Philippe Saad, Demal Schaefer. So we appeared before the commission earlier in the year, and we have gone through significant redesign and change to the scope of the project. So I think in front of you today, the project consists of 41 affordable housing units, previously 71, 66 memory care units, one-to-one replacement. This has not changed. 41 now significant trees have been retained, 10 additional to our previous plan. The parking is now 50 parking spaces, 35 underground garage spaces below the building. And then we are now in the plan preserving the 1956 legacy building known as the Rogerson House, part of this proposal. Everyone knows Rogerson House from the Jamaicaway. That is the 1956 Rogerson House that will remain part of the proposal. The site is along Beaufort Road and Jamaicaway in Jamaica Plain. And as we look closer, Beaufort Road is one of the closest connections between Center Street and Jamaicaway, and the site is significantly large. However, there's a small portion of the site that fronts Beaufort Road. And Beaufort Road constitutes the only access to the site. So what has changed? Previously in front of the commission, we presented a building that was 7 stories tall, and we heard from the commission that I'll repeat this casually. There was too much happening. We've also heard that the 3-story masonry portion of the building should be reconsidered, that we need to think about a little bit more of unifying the element across the building, and maybe the building should be a little bit quieter, as the street is a quiet street. In terms of overall massing, the whole site is considered for 2 buildings, the 7-story building previously and the 6-story building previously. Phase 1 is what is in front of the commission. However, the overall site is being presented just so that the commission has and the neighborhood and the community has city has a full view of what the intent is there. But this is what was previously. And what we've revised right now is a reduced height, reduced density, preservation of the legacy building, more preservation of trees, and an enlargement of the courtyard, as some members of the commission have highlighted it being too narrow. And then a reorganization of the service access to the building and from the building, so as to not change much of the nature of the service delivery right now along Beaufort. We worked over the past several months to really reduce the effect of this building onto this residential street, which is Beaufort Road. And now you will see that the building in question is the yellow massing that you see on the right-hand side. Although overall it is a 6-story building, the way the massing has been formed, it will appear in majority as a 4-story building along the street. And as we move closer to the building, the upper 2 stories, level 5 and level 6, will disappear behind the mass. Again, this 4-story looking building will be in line with what's across the street and a shorter streetscape. And as we look at the corner between Lakeville and Beaufort Road, again, the building will appear as 4 stories on the street. And from the Jamaicaway as well, given how the massing has been reorganized, the building will appear 4 to 5 stories at max. We've developed also a video to show how this massing will truly appear as 4 stories as we get closer. This was a major part of the discussion with the community as well as with the commission. And from the other side as well, as you walk from Jamaicaway into Beaufort Road, the building, as you get closer to it, more closer to the residential aspect of Beaufort Road, the building will appear as 4 stories. Our phasing strategy remains unchanged to the exception that we are preserving the legacy building along Jamaicaway. So phase 1 will have to happen in the backyard of the current building. The building will be erected. The 66 residents of the memory care will be moved from the existing facility into the new building. The old building that does not serve the purpose of the future for the client will be demolished, and then phase 2 later on will come in to complete the site. We chose to start with a site strategy just because the program of this building is fairly unique. It is a 3 stories of memory care as well as 3 stories of residential on top. However, a lot of the parameters that are governing the site and the building are really based in what we call dementia positive design. And I wanted to highlight a few elements here that have been guiding us for this project in particular. And those individuals, the 66 individuals who would live in the building, part of the memory care units will be confined in majority to their homes. So connection to the environment is very important. Creating different types of landscapes that are of discovery have been included in our designs. The notion of familiar elements around the site and in the building are important elements for wayfinding. And also a lot of effort has been put into allow people to maintain dignity and independence as they live their daily lives in the building itself. Safety is a major concern, and who doesn't want to have joy in their lives as we are in our new home, in our new community. So the site strategy, as I said, is geared mainly from the memory care design perspective, and that is the site plan of the building. Before we talk about the streetscape, I want to talk about the 3 different areas that are important for this program. The internal courtyard within the donut-shaped building, as we call it. This building is only 3 stories high. The courtyard is on level 1, and it's fully enclosed and fully safe. So the new design has enlarged the courtyard to allow more daylight to come in. We have also removed a portion of the building on the top right to preserve mature trees, and this allowed us to create another pocket park or outdoor space for the residents of the memory care building. And then on that portion of the building, another type of landscape, which is more of a discovery landscape, more a tactile and textural landscape, and also a journey as people leave their household and go down into a very sloped walkway to get into a different portion of the landscape. This is a greenhouse as well as a connection to that more contemplative and quiet garden in the back. So if you are confined to the first floor of this building because you are part of the memory care household, you will have access to 3 outdoor spaces, one that is fully enclosed, one that is of discovery, and one that is more contemplative. The outer courtyard is open to the general public and to the community and is designed within phase 1 and phase 2 of the building. And there's a pergola right there, or a landscape element with some topography or level changes that is intended to create that separation and that safety without using 8-foot-high PVC fences throughout the site. Stepping back into the street, this is Beaufort Road, and the new design has really maintained the width of the sidewalk as a continuation from the Forbes building next to us. So the sidewalk continues and really enters the site itself. There is a pedestrian entrance to the building right here through the double door and through the main lobby. And there's a planted buffer between the sidewalk and the building, very much in line with the traditional New England architecture of what is actually across the street. These the buildings across the street are really a reflection of the historic townhouses and brownstones of the Back Bay and the South End. Part of the revisions is that we have eliminated the driveway that goes between our building and the Forbes building, and we have concentrated all drop-offs and deliveries inside the site and around that parking lot that would serve the visitors and anybody who is coming in to get dropped off. The network of pathways also will continue through the front lawn, which will be enhanced. However, there's no new construction that will happen on the front lawn of the site along Jamaicaway. Excuse me. For the sake of time, I'll skip through these. We have a lot of materials here, but will be available for further questions later on. So this is the streetscape with some precedent images, permeable pavers and raised planters. This is a section through the site in this location here. The secure garden towards the back, encapsulated by the pergola walkway that really creates the buffer zone between the public and the private. Some precedent images of this discovery landscape that is fully accessible for the residents of the memory care. And then we'll move on to the larger lawn that is outside for the public. And then some other precedent images that we are suggesting how this space could be furnished with passive recreation, shaded area, and a multitude of different flooring and surfacing. And some planting as well for the courtyard. I want to talk about the context analysis and what changed in the building exterior. So our team looked at the immediate site that is predominantly masonry, but a very diverse kind of types of masonries. We have buildings that span the spectrum of 100 years that have been built in the immediate vicinity. But we looked back and for the new design, we looked at what constituted truly the historic Boston architecture. So we abstracted some of those elements such as the bay windows and the archways. And we've looked at also other elements in masonry architecture, as we call them, the highlights, or the insertions of the textures that really transform a field of brick into a rich facade. This one, excuse me. All right. And so we looked back at the site and we saw a lot of these elements in the building across the street from us, excuse me. So the building on the bottom right is the Beaufort Street condominium, which is immediately in front of the site. And we've highlighted again these elements that are based in the historic architecture of Boston. The curved bay windows, the three-partite vertical organization, as well as a strong base that is highlighted with more masonry and more detail. As we look at the buildings on site itself, on our site, the historic Rogerson House, built in 1957, is a three-story building with a very rigorous repetition of windows and some detailed as they appear on the parking lot. All right. And even when we look at the immediate context, the Forbes has that repetitive motif of a masonry, a facade. Although it's a staggered windows, there is a regularity of that building that really guides the larger building. I'll skip through that just for the sake of time. So going back to our volume has been reduced from 7-story to a 4-story along Beaufort Road with a 6-story behind it. We've changed the massing and reduced the impact based on what we've heard from the neighbors and from the commission on Lockstead Ave, and we've enlarged the courtyard, as I've said previously. We've also highlighted the front of Beaufort Road. We know that this is a special part of the building that, just like the different townhouses that are across the street from us, there is multiple points of entries, and there is a special interest, there's special attention that has been focused on that first floor. So there's special attention on that. Knowing that the building is long, we have also divided it vertically into several segments. And then we've applied materials. And again, to minimize the effect of a larger building onto the streetscape, we've used 2 different materials. We've used a masonry for Beaufort Road, and we've used a cementitious material that reflects the Lockstead Avenue horizontal siding materials on the back of the building. And we put it overall into the context. Phase 1, which is in front of the commission, but also phase 2 follows a similar approach. Shadow studies to show that the building really casts a shadow on itself and does not impede much on the houses to the north. And then another one for September. I will go through this quickly for the sake of time. And I can come back to this if people have questions. So looking at the building itself, this is the overall massing. When we look at it on the in terms of facade, because of its multiple programmatic elements within one volume, we started by understanding the module. The memory care unit module constitute half of the independent living module. So this helped us establish the repetition in the building, especially along Beaufort Road. So we layer this on into a series of fenestrations and vertical articulation of the masonry. We've highlighted the first floor, borrowing the arched language from the across the street and the historic masonry architecture in Boston. We've also introduced a band across that would actually punctuate the base of the building in relationship to the body of the building, as well as a crown that also has it distinguishes the top of the building through some masonry pattern. We looked at the buildings on the side as well, and we followed a similar strategy. So this is a study to illustrate the siding part of the building, the 6 stories, if we were to say. And again, in a similar way, the building follows a rigorous repetition, although within each one of these modules, there are some variety to add some textures and textures to the facade. An elevation of Beaufort Road. Now our building right there in the center sits almost as a transition between the larger Forbes building and the smaller scale on the left-hand side. And as we cut a section through the site, we can see how the building now relates further to the Beaufort Street condominiums, and it steps down to the smaller houses along Lockstead Avenue. The building, three-dimensional bird's eye view of phase 1 and phase 2 together, explaining the materiality of the site and highlighting how the courtyard that serves memory care residents has become significantly larger, following up the request from the commission. And then another view taken from northwest of phase 1 and phase 2, including the legacy building maintained along Jamaicaway. These are rendered facades of our building. You will notice predominantly brick. And then as we cut the section across the site, the composition between the masonry and the cement siding, how they sit next to each other. Some more sections through the site explaining the volume of this building. And then that's a section through the courtyard of which I've explained previously, the landscape elements of. This is a view, this is a three-dimensional view of the building along Beaufort Road. And we'd like to note that how the building reflects the curved natures of the historic masonry of Boston. We've simplified it, turned it into a regular rhythm, and fluted those elements vertically to create an interest in that facade, as it is a longer facade along the street. You will notice that there are vertical segmentation also, and these are the cuts that will break down the mass along the sidewalk. We've also—
That's 20 minutes, Philippe.
All
Are you
right.
closing in here?
Okay, 2 minutes.
Great, thank you.
We've studied the building in multiple colors of bricks, and then we landed in the darker red iron spot brick. It gives that beautiful sheen, and as the building starts to curve and scallops, there's a beautiful reflection of that brick that that starts to happen. Here you can see how we've introduced the textural patterns at between level 1 and level 2, and as the crown at the top of the building. And we've introduced a wood lining to highlight those special elements in the building. I'll skip through that for the moment. Talking about the two parts, or the two materials juxtaposed next to each other, the masonry and the siding taking more of the horizontal expression, introducing some textural fiber cement panels. However, in the brick, masonry has more of the verticality of the fluted elements along the street. Three-dimensional view of the corner of Lakeville and Beaufort. The entrance of the building, as I've highlighted, is right here, highlighted enough, but still discreetly with that canopy, and then a series of arches punctuating the building along the street. This is the vegetated buffer between the streetscape and the building, in line with what we have across the street, how this thick planted, beautiful buffer between historic homes and sidewalks happen in Boston. And then another view from the other side, from closer to Center Street. The Forbes building is on the right-hand side, and our building is in the center. Raised planters and a continuation of the sidewalk as an urban element from the Forbes building all the way to the Jamaicaway. Little close-up of the building. You will notice the sheen of the brick that I have mentioned previously. As the building curves, it starts to create this beautiful reflection of the light as the module continues. The windows, although irregular, have some variation, because some windows serves independent living, some windows serves the memory care below. So we've introduced a variety of windows with a deep box to allow for, again, extra textures and shadows to be cast and create depth into this facade along Beaufort Road.
Apologies for the further interruption, but that's another 2 minutes.
And that's the last one.
Great.
You're from Jamaicaway, looking at the whole complex. Thank you.
All right, David Hassine, looks like you're ready to get us going.
Yes. Philippe, what a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I love it. I particularly, I mean, I was not a part, I don't remember seeing the first iteration of this project, and obviously you've had a lot of back and forth with the community around scale and materiality, and it feels like that has been, to me, a very successful journey. This feels, I think the massing solution is very, very thoughtful and a little bit idiosyncratic, which I really appreciate. I really like, for example, the sort of up and down on this facade that breaks down that long facade into the kind of rhythm that one would see on a historic street of repetitive townhouses and so forth, but without literally recreating that. I find I'll let the landscape architect speak to the landscape, but having some experience with memory care, I feel like this is a very thoughtful combination of experiences for memory care, include the safe one and then the sort of accompanied journey, if you will, to the other spaces. And I think that's also created a really beautiful buffer between you and your neighbors, who I'm sure have been quite concerned about, how that juxtaposition would play out. So I'm very enthusiastic about this. I think that if I had minor comments, it would be about making sure that just a bit of the creativity that you've shown with the masonry could creep into the fiber cement composition, particularly around maybe the top and bottom of the building, where that's likely to be most visible. Yeah, it feels a little abrupt in terms of the richness and let's call it more straightforward expression. And I understand that you're juggling budgets,
Yes.
but I feel like you could take a tiny piece of the budget for the brick portion and shift it over to the fiber cement elements, and nothing would be lost. This is again totally a matter of impression or opinion. I really like the textured brick that you've incorporated above the arches that link to that first window that we're seeing in the view there. I do think that at the top of the building, the gracefulness of the curve, or the continuity of the curve, and the reflectivity that one would experience at the cornice is maybe a little bit compromised by the reintroduction of that texture at the top of the building, and gives the impression of a much stronger pier-like um, uh, view as you're looking down the street that I see in some of those renderings. When I think of the South End rhythm, for example, um, uh, there is a more of an unfolding of a fabric expression at the top, and that richness really shows up at the portals and the doorways and at the street level. Again, this is completely subjective remark, but I think that I think it might be nice to see a smoother expression at that top, and maybe that's that piece of detail that migrates over to the other building. But in general, I think if you could go to the site plan for one moment. In general, I think this is a really successful evolution of this project, and I think will over time be very much will very much fit into and become a part of the JP fabric. And yeah, I mean, again, this sort of, I think it's wonderful. It's a little funny to think of the 1957 building as the historic home, but I think that the project has gained from it, and I think that that identity that this particular stretch of Boston has, from the Jamaicaway, connecting it back to the history. You were well served, actually, by the requests to save that building, which I presume is going to be repurposed for the right programmatic elements. But looking at this site plan, again, the eccentricity of it, the sense of discovery about it, I really I think it's great. So I'm all in.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you.
Jonathan?
Thanks. I'm just coming off mute. I concur very much with the comments David highlighted. Philippe, I definitely congratulate you on a comprehensive presentation. I was not available or is not here for the first meeting, but your presentation was very methodical. You could tell a lot of thoughts gone into it. And by not seeing the first one, I feel like I know everything I need to know about the project through the breadth of content. So I really appreciate that. And I also applaud the amount of change. I had looked at the previous deck and had seen the design and now seeing this and the sensitivity and the softness and the approach to the overall site, just a good balance of building versus open space. Really excited to see the preservation of the Rogerson house along with the mature trees. I think that graceful setback from Jamaicaway and the real, preservation of the low density scale, the very walkable, pedestrian friendly scale of Jamaicaway is furthered by your preservation move here. So I'm glad to see that that could happen. There's a lot to like about the architecture. I really like your sort of play on the arches and sort of a modern manipulation, if you will, of the arch motif and how that's been deployed on the new facades of the phase. I think it's the phase two building that you have there. Um, I really like if you can go to maybe one of the renderings that you showed. Almost a comment that David was making about like the special brick, the what I call the checkerboard pattern of the brickwork. There is something nice about seeing that at the base, and then as you graduate up, perhaps, like David said, that doesn't exist, and it becomes more of a understanding of a punched window. And if you can think about the cornice expression, that might make those punches even more pronounced.
Sorry,
As a small,
Jonathan, it's taking
yeah.
forever to get the rendering. I apologize. But
Oh, that's fine. As a small detail, way at the top, I'd be curious to see how you're thinking about a coping. Yeah, any of these is fine.
here, this is,
Oh, it looks like you have, yeah, it looks like you may have a metal coping already incorporated there.
yeah,
But that's a minor detail that I'm more than sure you will get to. And I really like how you've taken the brick, which is, traditionally thought of as a heavy material, and have made it appear light and fabric-like, and almost like with these pleats happening. It definitely creates a softness. I also think a building across the street. It's a nice sort of conversation you're having with that building, with the way the curbs work traditionally and how you're kind of responding to them here. Um, I think my probably last comment for further study would be what I would call the transitional spaces, or these like vertical slots. You had some diagrams where you
yeah,
broke
yeah,
the mass into
yeah.
chunks and you had these vertical slots. I can't tell if those are like balconies or if I see like these floor ledges coming out. So those. I don't know if those are, but if there's anything that can happen there that I guess could better respond to the amount of enclosure the rest of the building has, where you have these punches,
Yeah.
I can't, I think that's one piece of maybe perhaps articulation for further
Sure.
development. But like I said, I won't take up a lot of time, but there's a lot to like, and I applaud the overall general response here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Anne Marie?
I was at the previous presentation, so I agree with my colleagues. I'm really happy to see the reduction in the scale and massing, the adjustment of the materials. I think the building of Beaufort Street really does a much better job of meeting the neighborhood. As you continue to develop the scheme, could you go to a plan? I apologize, I'm looking at a previous draft that was shared with the community. Could you go to a site plan of the completed, all of the phases?
Yeah.
Because one thing I would really like you to think about, and I too also really appreciate the preservation of the 1956 building. I would encourage you to really think about the entrance onto the site as sort of a gateway to the site. I realize you are balancing a lot of the phasing issues, trying to get access onto the site for service, but it seems to me this is an opportunity, given the nature of the site, the scale of the site, to create more of a sense of entry, and an idea of, where do I go as a visitor to enter the building that's set back here. it just feels a little tight. You angled the piece of the building there, and I'm would imagine this will be developed over time, but just would really like to, it feels like the entrance to the site, or the vehicular entrance, is sort of shoehorned in. And this is just such a interesting convergence of conditions of both streets and building typologies. I think how you address that will really make a difference in terms of the, the overall, as David has seen, we'll say the ensemble of the completed site.
Thank you. The entrance, can I respond?
Yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
this entrance is very squeezed because we need the square footage of phase one, and I wanted to just show that that's how phase one and existing are going to coexist until the existing gets demolished. So there is and we're also trying to manage the future phase two construction from that very small little access point that we're maintaining. We cannot access the site from Jamaicaway, as you probably know. So there is a lot of, the building is basically left over from what we could do. It's the negative space that has become a positive space of the building.
Right. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to sign off momentarily. And so you are much more familiar with the details of the site, and I assume that was a piece of it, is the negotiation of the phasing with it. But I do, anyway, that's my comment as you continue to develop it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne Marie. David Nagahiro?
Yeah, well, I think one of the comments that Anne Marie had made in the first first round, was about the idea of it feeling like a campus of buildings. And I think that was very successfully, created in this version of it. I think before it felt like the pieces were a little bit desperate and the spaces weren't holding together. But I think, congratulations. I opened your package honestly, and I said, here we go. This is it. This is really a fantastic solution to listening to, I think, the feedback. I heard that you had a lot of slides coming into this presentation and you had to pare it back, which tells me that you looked even deeper into a lot of the details and took to heart the comments that were made. And it's a 180 from where you were before. It's really quite striking, and I'm excited to see this built. There's so many good comments that David had made, and Anne-Marie and others, that I'll just leave it at that. But one of the things that Mick Young said as well is the idea of wayfinding was very important, and the way the building kind of presented itself. And I think with the clarity of how the spaces work together now, I think it has that kind of clarity. So very well done. I'll just keep it short.
Thanks, David. Laura Solano?
Thank you for the presentation, and this is just so remarkably improved. And I deeply appreciate how much you've thought about the landscape and the importance of having different landscapes. And I'm curious how people get to these various landscapes. If you wouldn't mind, I understand how you get to the memory care garden, but I'm curious about the other open spaces. So the courtyard, I know, is open to the public.
So
go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. So this courtyard here is open. There's no fencing. So we encourage people walking through the sidewalk to go across to Jamaicaway. Yep. This is accessible for you and I going through JP. This courtyard here is internal to the memory care. So it is the highest security right there. Mm-hmm. So the doors could remain open at any point of the day. In the summertime, people could go in and out uninterrupted. So this is part of the supporting people's independence as they want to go in and out. This terrace here is of the living room of the memory unit. So this, although the community, Rogerson House, could decide to keep it open at all time. However, it's more on the outer side of the building. Some separation is being built on the edges of the property. There's going to be a fence between us and the neighbors, but we're trying to conceal those elements that are usually, what is the word? Unfriendly, like a fence, building those multiple landscaped areas within the building frameworks. So, so this landscape is accessible from this terrace through the pergola, going down the meandering path into the greenhouse, and then that's a path that takes you into the more contemplative garden. There would be a fence here to create a little bit more security for those who access the back. That is not shown on those plans. But that's the extent of the secure memory gardens. This building here is for phase 2, and it's not part of the review at the moment. But this is the simple side yard. There is an egress gate here that goes by the building and gets you to the Jamaicaway. Anything else I didn't answer?
No, I'll ask some specifics. I think, you know, the buildings are so well thought out, and the spaces that they leave behind are really fantastic. And I think the way to start to approach those over time is to think about programming, and how residents can enjoy more of the landscape, you know, accompanied by their family. I'm happy to see that there's thought about play. That's a really big space, that there are a lot of opportunities. And I don't know whether or not there's any consideration about doing something to that, the space that leads to the Jamaicaway, before all of the building, before phase 2 is done. It might be worth the investment. I mean, one of the things that's great about play is that it's an easy thing to watch, right? And I think that this could be a little better integrated into that. And again, I understand that's future work. I will say that on Beaufort Road, the phase 1 building, I find that landscape in the front to be a bit suffocating. And your building is so beautiful that, and I understand you're also pulling off, you know, adjacent landscape. But one thing that I'll say, and part of it has to do with safety, is making the sidewalk bigger. Those planters are big enough that you can really, you know, take some space off and make that walkway a little more generous. You know, I also think about, you know, people walking with family, et cetera, just like you have shown in this section. There's a lot of slope in this, as you know, we witnessed going from 4 stories on Beaufort to 6 stories behind. And so consideration of what happens adjacent to the new facade on the side area. How does service work?
Service goes into off street. So this was a big discussion with the community. They did not want, they were pushing back a lot on delivery trucks and service trash and all this. Right now, the community operates everything out of their parking lot. So we kept it in a similar way, although the parking lot's reconfigured. But right now, the drop-off areas happen here along this pull-up curb. So if I am a trash truck, or if I am a delivery person, or if I'm an Uber, I will come off the road and drop the passengers or the objects that I have off-site, off-road.
And then there's a mention of a garage. I know you're letting the neighbors park in that parking space. The garage is in phase 1.
The garage is in phase 1, and it's for staff only, for the memory care. But also the client is opening up off hours the garage for the neighbors. That was part of the discussions. And there is a door here that allows people to come in through a ramp under. And I have a floor plan, but I did not put it up.
Yep, that's okay. Thank you for that. And the only other thing I'll say is to think about how topography can enhance some of these spaces in the landscape. And as you know, for memory care, having someplace that is consistent with some change is really important. And in the landscape, consider putting a lot of evergreens in, honestly, just so that it kind of holds the space throughout the year. And then the last thing I'm going to ask about is the phasing and what happens to the site during the phasing. And I suspect you cannot give a timeline, but would you give it a guess? So as you're showing, phase one, how long might that stay and what happens to the site?
I can't. So it's also affordable housing. So
Yep.
it has to be funded and the funds have to be provided by the state. So
yeah, Philippe, I'm just saying, like, take us through those diagrams. I think you had a sheet that had 4 diagrams. We just want to understand, what time is a big factor in this project.
So phase one, which is this shape, will
Yeah.
be built as the first step. It's a 6-story building, so probably 18 months. Starting, I think 2027 is where we are hoping, if we get funded, we'll get in the ground.
That would be the goal.
Right, Jeremy?
Yes, and Jeremy Vieira here. I can speak to a little bit. I'm the director of real estate development at Rogerson. The way we envision is exactly how Philippe mentioned, that this project would be funded about an 18-month construction period, at which point we would begin over approximately a 3-month to 4-month period. Once it is completed, moving residents over from the existing building to the new building, at which point approximately probably about a 2-month period to remove the existing, maybe 3, to remove the existing, at which point the landscaping will be filled out in that interior, that exterior courtyard, I guess I'll call it, that negative space in the crook of the arm. And then we would be going into funding rounds, and then hopefully could get that off the ground promptly thereafter. So in that timing is still something that much that has to be worked out on exactly how that would look. But we would like, ideally, sometime, about 6 months after the removal of the other building, we could begin on phase 2.
Yep, that's really helpful. Thank you. And do you imagine doing the memory garden? I understand the circulation down there can't be in place until the arbor is in, but do you imagine that becoming a space besides the interior courtyard for that duration? Let me circle it.
No, I know what you mean.
Okay, go ahead.
We don't want to backtrack. What we don't want to do is do a landscape and then we have to redo it. So I think right now, this is the space that the first floor residents might utilize only, because also there's a drop between this backyard and the upper level.
Oh, yes,
and
quite a drop.
the zigzag and the meandering path.
Is
So
there access this way?
no,
Okay, also because of topography.
it's topography.
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
to minimize excavation, the building is on street level. However, the backyard is 6 feet below, so there is a topography difference.
Yep.
That we're using for our advantage as well.
Yep. But I deeply appreciate the forward thinking about these. I mean, nothing is better for everybody than landscape, but it's particularly important in these types of facilities. It's calming, right? And it also helps families feel like they can come and really occupy and be, spend a day with their family members. So nice project. Looking forward to seeing it.
All right.
I want to acknowledge Letitia Torme. She's on our team. She's our landscape architect. She's right there.
Hi, Letitia. How are you?
Letitia. let me just round it out with a couple of comments because I am in agreement with the commissioners. This project has really dramatically improved. The massing is so much better than we saw it the last time. So congrats to the team. I'm really happy about the preservation of the trees in the upper right-hand corner of this building. But I think because there's such excitement about the consistency of the facade on Beaufort Road. I do have a couple of nitpicky comments, and I would take it as excitement about helping, push this to the next level. I think I might be, alone in an island. I just think that the concave fluting doesn't really work with the arches on the ground floor. And I just feel like there's something weird about that geometry of the arch and the concave. And, I will leave that up to you to think about what that means. But the liner of the wood, in addition to the arch and the pattern above, I think those are three moves that are really just not working in unison. The arch that you showed on all the, buildings across the way, they actually are lined with brownstone. They have some structural logic, and I just want you to think about that. I think if you just flatten that arch and just had the brick pattern above and lined it with a different material, it might architecturally be more satisfying. The one other comment that I have is, the alignment of the windows. I'm curious if this concave is a complete curve or if it's
No.
faceted, like where the relationship of the windows to the wall. That depth, I think, is going to be a really important relationship to study. I wouldn't, the windows projecting forward of that wall seems a little unsatisfying. And so maybe you can give us a little bit more feedback on that.
Thank you for noting this. And the evolution of our design was at the beginning all concave, understanding the complexity of putting a window in a concave wall and how this whole thing relates. So the place where the window is located is flat. And then you have the brick like two ears sticking out, creating that concavity, if I were to say the right word. But the plane, but the plane where the window is flat.
Okay.
It is not curved, and then the window is inset in it. What you see projecting out is a visor for some sun shading and for additional texture.
Yeah.
Philippe, does the concavity also assist with the sun shading? Or no?
Even in a minor way, just because it's very not severely concave.
Yeah. I was just wondering if that
You
was
see what
part
I
of
mean?
the technique.
Yeah.
I just think the depth of the window would be just, such a nice addition to the
Yes.
depth that you're already getting from the reading of the fluting. The center portion being taller than the rest, I think, is really useful if it's what you're doing to hide some mechanical equipment. So I think that's something I just wanted to note. I
Should
can
we
see
have
there's
it
like
higher?
4 feet higher or, some dimension higher than the rest.
It's higher to hide the 6-story building behind it as well, so it doesn't appear. It's a little bit of that as well that we have
Yeah,
studied.
I think, sorry, I know you were
Yeah.
zooming in on a closer detail. If you want to go back to that, you can.
No, I just wanted to like really show that yes, the window, because of how the wall composition and the passive house nature of this building and the brick, the window will be set in and there will be some additional depth articulated through these windows.
Got it. Yeah. I think that could be really, really handsome. And then my last comment is on the, the cementitious portion on the back. I recommend looking at a dark color. I really think that if that volume recedes, I think it would really nicely complement the brick, massing that you've articulated on Beaufort Road. I really think that that wants to just be elegant, and just a deep, rich color is what I think would be really handsome to offset this brick facade. Okay, those are my architectural comments to push this forward. I think we can see if there are any public comments. I'm not seeing any more commissioners raising their hands. Christina.
Excellent. A reminder that starting January 1st, 2026, the commission will limit live public testimony to the project's introduction. Members of the public interested in submitting comments to the commission are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project's review. At this time, we invite any members of the public in attendance who wish to contribute public comments to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Dor Fox, one moment while I make you co-host. Dor, are you able to unmute yourself? Try one more time.
Okay, I think I did.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All right. My name is Dor Fox. I live on Beaufort Road across from the project, actually a little bit closer to Center Street than to where this building is. I would look into, well, I do look into the Forbes building, not this building directly. I do want to say that I appreciate that the applicant has downsized the building. As much as I do like having affordable housing in our neighborhood, I am pleased that it is not as tall and bulky as the prior building. Of course, from my own perspective, I think it would have been great if somehow they could incorporate the 6th floor into the 5th floor. And if it could be at most a 5-story building, with predominantly looking like a 4-story building. I don't know if that's possible or if anybody else is concerned about that. I am much more pleased that there is a brick facade going along Beaufort Road and also going around the other portion of the building. I feel like this fits in much more with the neighborhood than the previous design does. While I'm disappointed that the historic house on Beaufort Road is not being retained, I'm not sure how that would have fit into the design, taking a look at this. And I am pleased that the applicant was able to maintain the 1950s building along the Jamaicaway, while also still being able to make a less intense building on the rest of the site. Since initially it was stated that it was an either-or situation. So I'm glad to see that they were able to kind of downsize the rest of the project and retain that the 1950s, what they refer to as the legacy building. I'm still concerned about a few things. One thing is I was a little concerned when it was mentioned maybe there should be less landscaping along Beaufort Road. Living on Beaufort Road, I appreciate the fact that Beaufort Road does have trees and vegetation. And so I'm hoping that there is as much landscaping as we can have along Beaufort Road.
Dor, that's 2 minutes.
Okay.
It goes by
Thank you very much.
quickly. Thank you so much for your comments. Sally, one moment while I unmute you here and promote you to co-host. Sally, are you able to unmute yourself?
Mine's unmuted now, I think.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have submitted written comments and a draft sketch that was generated out of the neighborhood that showed the capacity of the site, which is very large, to retain the existing 1956 legacy building and include all of the affordable units that were originally proposed with no reduction in a series of 4-story buildings. So I offer that as an option. I mean, I just for the commission to look at as something that could have been done. However, I will say the sense from the presentation that was held on, I think, the 12th of November from the, I'm speaking only for myself, but it certainly seemed to me like the abutters, the rest of my abutting community was very, very pleased, as I am, to see this massing and the density handled in such a sensitive way, bringing back the setbacks closer, increasing the setbacks, et cetera. I wanted to reinforce three things that I heard from the commission. I think in terms of what Anne Marie mentioned, I'm sorry to use your first names, that the entrance is now has two piers, a kind of common estate entrance at the corner there. I think that the fact that the project has been conceived in a bifurcated way has driven some design decisions which diminish the site, and the tightness of that location is an unfortunate side effect of having to combine both phases of the construction. So the other piece of entrance that I've heard from several people is concern about drop-offs at the pedestrian entrance on Beaufort, which I think is a little under considered. I think both that entrance and the vehicular entrance at the courtyard are basically exactly as they were presented to you originally. And if they can have a little more attention from the commission, I think that would be warranted.
Sally, that was 2 minutes. I apologize for the interruption.
I have my comments to you. You can read them if you like.
Excellent. I did circulate your letter. Thank you for submitting it in advance of the meeting. Much appreciated. Okay, let me just take a quick scroll here through participants and make sure I haven't missed anyone. Okay, so commissioners, at this time, I see no additional hands, and thank you to folks who have stayed so late to contribute their comments. We appreciate them.
Need to make
Well,
a decision.
I mean, I think, I think, always thoughtful comments from the general public. But I think that some of those issues certainly can continue to be worked out with staff as the project moves forward. So I would like to propose that they come back to the full commission for a vote with any updates that they might make between now and then. But I also just want to say that it's really nice to see a project make such significant changes, and I know that came at a cost to the client and the proponent. And Walter, thank you for indulging that process, because I think this fits into the community in a much stronger way that will stand the test of time.
I agree with that. I would certainly get behind that, and appreciate the work. It's a nice execution.
Yeah, I think we heard a lot of positivity from all of the commissioners. Definitely some refinements that can continue to be made, especially where you are, at the stage of the development of the design. I think we are ready to advance this to full commission. But I encourage you to continue working on the details and the comments that we raised as a commission, but some of the public comments also that you're receiving. I think, I'm sure you're noting them and thinking about how to satisfy those comments as well. But I think, Christina, with that, I think this is advancing. So we're going to have a busy next couple of full commissions.
Yes, and incredibly, it was dark out when we started our meeting. So it feels, even though it's 7:30, it feels like it's just so much later than it is. We'll have a very full December agenda, and look forward to seeing commissioners and proponents very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Take care.